go ahead and get started. Just wanted to welcome everybody to Practical and Accessible AI for today's Trade Compliance Professional. We're excited that you guys are here. The goal today in this webinar is to talk about AI and how it can be used to improve efficiency and accuracy in trade compliance. Not tomorrow, not the next day, but now. We'll talk a little bit about how AI can be helpful in general and specific applications. We'll talk about the challenges facing the industry when it comes to implementing AI and why it's taken so long to get to this point. And we'll talk about also some future trends and see where the industry is going in regards to AI. Any questions can be put in the question chat, and this webinar will be recorded and we'll send the recording out to all attendees. So we're going to start with some introductions. We've got a great group of panelists. We thank them very much for their time. I'll let them each introduce themselves. We have Joe, Todd, and Lee. Joe, do you want to start with a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. I'm Joe Morales. I'm the CTO of QuickCode AI. We are a relatively recent entry into trade compliance. Fundamentally an AI company, and we use AI to solve trade compliance problems. I've been a veteran of the software industry, been building products in the software industry for about 30 years, and the last several with QuickCode.ai.
That's great, thanks. Go ahead, Todd.
Thank you, Bo. Hi, everybody. My name is Todd Smith, and I am the founder and CEO of KYG Trade. KYG stands for Know Your Goods. I am a licensed customs broker and a former trade and customs partner with the Big Four. And I left the Big Four about 3 years ago to start KYG Trade. And looking really forward to talking to you guys today about what we're doing.
Awesome.
I'm Lee Schmid. Right now I'm just doing some consulting work for clients in North America, Europe, and Asia. Before that, for 25 years, I was with the Limited, and then it became Limited Brands, then L Brands, and finally Victoria's Secret. During that time, I was Senior Vice President in charge of global trade compliance. And prior to that, I was a partner at KPMG up in Vancouver, Canada.
That's great. Sounds like we've got a wealth of experience here. We're going to go ahead and move into kind of a general overview of AI. Joe, if you would start us off. Joe is a data scientist. So for those of us that are not data scientists, can you briefly describe to us what artificial intelligence is and fundamentally at its core as it relates to trade compliance?
Sure. You know, in general, artificial intelligence has been around for 50, 60 years. Kind of the idea of artificial intelligence is to make a computer, give it kind of the capabilities, the semblance of intelligence that you would expect from a human being. And that really is not making a thinking machine so much as, being able to encode the knowledge of experts into a machine. And so that's been done in a variety of ways over the course of the last 50 or 60 years. Starting back in the 70s with what we would call expert systems, which were rule-based systems. And in rule-based systems, you get experts to write rules, and then machines can interpret those rules and apply those rules in different situations. I will tell you in trade compliance, like HS classification, the very first artificial intelligence HS classification engines, and many that still exist today, are rule-based systems. And I've seen a lot of examples of those, where classification experts can take a section of the code at least and write rules for determining how to classify individual goods based on their properties. And that makes sense if you know the tariff book. That makes a certain amount of sense. Of course, the problem is the tariff book is very, very large, and maintaining those rules is a very, very hard problem. From rule-based systems, as computers got more complex and had more capabilities, artificial intelligence moved to machine learning. So instead of having experts write rules to tell a machine how to react, what we did was we provided machines with examples For instance, like character recognition is a very common one. You give machines examples of all the different characters, all the letters of the alphabet or the numbers or whatever you want it to recognize. And then it can basically analyze all those examples and figure out for itself, kind of through a trial and error process, the rules for what constitutes an A versus what constitutes a Z. And if you give it enough examples of that, what we would call labeled training data, it can come up with a very robust set of rules and then kind of apply those rules to things that it hasn't seen yet, as long as they fall into that set of, kind of predefined examples that it has seen. You could do the same thing in our case with like HS classification, the example I used before. The problem is, of course, there's 18,000 possible classifications in the US HTS, and coming up with all of the examples, sufficient examples to provide to a machine to allow it to do that would be problematic. So those are machine learning systems. Machine learning systems went all through, very big in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. Most of what we think of as artificial intelligence today is machine learning, and it can be applied to anything as long as you can provide it sufficient training data. But at the end of the 20-teens, 2017 and beyond, there was an explosion in a new type of artificial intelligence, and that's what we think of as these generative models that we know today. Everybody is familiar with ChatGPT, which exploded a few years ago, and that's really kind of the most well-known example of a generative artificial intelligence. And so what's a generative artificial intelligence? Well, it's the idea that if you can give a machine enough information, and specifically in this case, language information, it can begin to understand the language. And how did that happen? Well, it's the same idea as machine learning, in that you give it examples of things. In the case of these large language models, what did we give it? We gave it the entire internet, right? So these large language models are trained. Different models are trained on different things, but fundamentally they're trained on large chunks of text, and the largest ones really on the entire internet. And the way they're trained is, like, given a sentence, what is the most likely next sentence? And they are just kind of adjusted until they can predict the next sentence. And once they can do that, then they can kind of just generate text, and then from that we can expand it to images and everything else. And so these generative AI models, which seem to be able to create things out of nothing, are really the new wave of artificial intelligence, and really has taken the world by storm. And so when we talk about AI today, generally that's what we're speaking of, but it's built on the basis of, we had expert knowledge, we transfer that expert knowledge into a machine, and the machine's not really thinking for itself, is really coming up with the knowledge of experts that was trained into it. It just appears, in today's models, it appears to be thinking itself because so much knowledge has been dumped into it. That has, benefits, and it also has potential downfalls, which many people are familiar with, all of the potential problems of today's artificial intelligence. But in a nutshell, that's kind of what artificial intelligence is.
That's great, Joe. Thank you for that. That's a great AI backstory. Todd, what general functions do you see AI having the biggest impact on in trade compliance?
Yeah, I think it's going to impact us very positively in a lot of different ways. And of course, I'm bullish on this because I bet the farm and created a company that really, natively is very, very heavily driven on generative AI and other types of components of AI, including object and image recognition. I don't think that I guess about a year ago, everybody was really concerned that we were all going to lose our jobs because of AI, and I don't see that happening. I think now there should be less concern that we're losing our jobs, that we're going to be replaced by the AI assistants, just as a lot of us were concerned that we were going to lose our job because of the bots. No one lost their job, and I don't see that happening here. But it is going to it's going to have a very positive impact by enabling us as compliance professionals to work faster and smarter. And it will also be very good because of the generative nature of AI and the natural language processing capabilities of AI. If it's trained right, it will actually help to train and educate compliance professionals about the regulations, because it literally, the way we're seeing it work is it prompts the user to think about aspects of a product that are needed to be known in order to determine the regulatory requirements. And so it's almost like self-instructing, as you work with it. So it trains and it helps us get to answers faster. But I certainly am not advocating, as a CEO of a AI-assisted global trade management platform, that you take the answers and run. Humans still need to be involved to evaluate the output and confirm the output before proceeding.
That's a great point, Todd. Yeah, AI trains and pulls everything together. Lee, let me ask you, based on your experience as a corporate compliance officer, what is the general sense of how AI can help in a trade compliance officer's role?
I've seen AI in action at our company for a few years, actually. So on the retail side, they were using it for spotting trends and things like that, using just public domain data on sales. But on our side of the business, we were using it for things like due diligence. So importers really have to worry a lot about things like forced labor in the supply chain. And the AI can help. I mean, it's not just in the old days when we had detentions over quota, when it was there was quota on apparel coming into the U.S. and we had to prove that the goods qualified, but you only had to look at one factory just to show that the goods were actually made in that factory and qualified for the visa, the quota that was assigned. Now you have to go back through multiple tiers of suppliers to determine whether or not any of those potentially had forced labor in the creation of even the smallest component of your product. So there is no de minimis on forced labor. So you really have to look all the way back to where these products came from. So AI has access to the whole internet, as Joe said. So it can, that includes sanctioned party lists, and it includes public domain information that links companies to suppliers. And it can make a very nice diagram for you as to where your supplier gets their components and raw materials. And that can help you track back through and make sure that none of them are on any of these sanctioned party lists. So that's one area. Second area is tariff classification, for sure. Joe mentioned the old system, the rule-based system, and we actually built one back around 2008, and it was great. It was very helpful, and but as Joe said, I think it took us over a year to get only 3 chapters of the tariff completed, and there's a lot of input involved. So we built this thing that we call the dynamic compliance questionnaire. So as you answered questions, new ones would pop up, but that was all rule-based. And if somebody put something incorrect in there, it would really kick it out to a human to solve the problem, or it just didn't have the capability that AI has to ask questions, as Todd just mentioned. So tariff classification is another big one that I could see this becoming very useful. And the third one is origin rules. It's not just about marking rules, where how do I know what to put on my goods as far as, say, made in Canada or made in Mexico. But then you have a whole other set of rules that for duty preference, and that's even more complicated. So you have to really study the bill of materials in order to determine whether or not the goods qualify for one of these preference rules. So AI can do that very quickly and very effectively. So I think that's three areas I could think of where AI will be a big helper.
And what would you say about AI actually, is there a line between giving legal advice, like AI giving legal advice like free trade agreements? Is there a line that shouldn't be crossed by AI?
Well, one of the lines would be you can't give advice out to another company, but you can use it for your own purposes. So I think that's probably a big line. I'm not a lawyer, so
Good point.
I try not to give legal advice.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
But if you have one of the things is the as Joe mentioned, that people are worried that sometimes you'll get an incorrect response out of the AI, but a professional that really knows the rules will spot that quickly. So what AI does is put you in the right area, and then you can do some verification on that and determine, yes, that fits and that looks correct to me, and sort of approve it at that point. So I wouldn't go with any kind of first response out of AI as being the final answer. I think that's the one that you start checking to see if it all makes sense.
That makes total sense. So let's move on to some more specific applications. So Todd and Joe, you each run companies that offer AI-based products to solve different problems in compliance. Can you take a little time to talk through some of the specific problems you're solving in AI and how AI improves the efficiency?
Sure. I guess I'll go first. Like I said, I'm the CTO of QuickCode. Excuse me. In QuickCode, we kind of started, I used HS classification in some of my examples when talking about AI because that's a problem that's near and dear to my heart, because that's where we started at QuickCode in the trade services industry, really using AI to help with HS classification. And we looked at it from a lot of different ways and trying to figure out how to do it. And what we came down to, and a lot of what Lee and Todd said we found to be true, which is we can't replace a human classifier, and we don't intend to replace a human classifier. What we endeavored to build with QuickCode was a tool that could help a human classifier who already knows what they're doing, who knows their job, to really kind of do the same job that they're already doing, only do it much faster. And how do we do that? We talked to a couple of hundred of different classification experts and really got a feel for what their workflows were. And then we used AI to assist that workflow. And what is their workflow? Well, it's reading a lot of information, right? You have a good that you're trying to classify, or a product you're trying to classify, and it kind of has a description and it has other attributes about it. And then you're reading in the tariff book. Where does this fit in the tariff book? That giant 10-inch thick tariff book. And then you're reading across 300,000 cross rulings and trying to find things that apply to that. And then there's other publications. There's the World Customs Organization's explanatory notes, which has information on how to classify things into different chapters and different sections. Then there's Custom and Border Patrol's informed compliance publications. And so when we talk to users, they kind of consult all these sources. If it's something they're familiar with, they kind of have a head start because they kind of know where to look. But this is a process that takes tens of minutes, hours, tens of hours, depending upon the complexity of the thing that they're trying to classify and the familiarity that they have with that thing. Well, when I talked about generative AI, one of the things I talked about in these large language models, ChatGPTs, that we're familiar with, is they fundamentally understand language. And it's not just like they can spot a word; they know what the word means, and they can spot synonyms to that word. So they really do understand language because of the way they've been trained, and so they can do all that reading for the user. They can take the description of the product, they can read all those source materials, and they can bring to the user things from those source materials that are relevant to that thing that they're trying to classify. And in some cases, some of the things that it brings are not relevant. but the user, being an expert, can spot those things very, very quickly. And so that's, our use of AI is to basically do the reading for the user and bring the evidence to the user and put it in front of them at their fingertips, so they can, instead of taking 10 minutes or hours to go out and search all those source materials, they can get them at their fingertips. They can see what's relevant. They can do the classification very quickly. That's kind of where we started. And then once we did that, we realized, okay, now that you have what's the purpose of that classification? Well, it's, number one, is to find out how much tariff you have to pay, but there's so much more involved in doing an entry. And all of it kind of stems from that classification. And so, we have expanded our AI to include all the forms of compliance that need to be done. And we're expanding into compliance monitoring, which allows you, given that you have all of these things that you have in your product database that you're importing on a continuing basis, how do you know you're still in compliance on all of them? Well, the AI can continually be updated as new things come out, as new anti-dumping cases come out, as new TROS rulings are issued, as new PGA requirements come out, as new tariff schedules come out. The AI can automatically update and bring to your attention, hey, this came out and it may be relevant to these products that you have previously imported or continuing imported or have classified. And it can do that because it can read and it can understand, and it can just fundamentally read far more than a human can read in a given amount of time. So that's quick code. That's how we apply AI to the trade compliance space.
Absolutely. Todd, same question. What are some problems that KYG is solving, and how is AI improving?
Yeah, that'd be great. And am I sharing my screen? Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's great. All of the companies that are working in this space have slightly different approaches. I remember when I was a partner at KPMG in the trade and customs practice, some of you may remember IBM Watson, and we had a loose partnership with IBM, and they approached us about getting Watson to classify products, and we tried and it failed. But that was like 10 years ago. And then, of course, you probably heard, most of you may have heard of 3CE, which was also using early forms of AI to classify products. The point is that there are today lots of different approaches to using AI to classify a product. And so the platform that we're creating is more of like an ecosystem and an orchestration platform. So the users don't necessarily have to decide on just one approach. As you can see here, we enable users and companies to pick one or more approaches to doing a number of things, including HS classification. The key is getting all of the information about the product, as Joe said, before you feed it into one of the models. And so this is an example where once you've anchored the description of the product and yes, objects and images of a product, a platform like ours can then feed that information into multiple HS classification tools, including QuickCode. And as you can see here, we have a partnership with QuickCode. We're in the process of integrating their solution into our platform, as you can see here, just as we have with Simply Duty, Avalara, which acquired 3CE. Zonos has a tool. We've created Chat HTS, which is internal to us. But the point is that with a platform like KYG Trade, you're not locked in forever into just one vendor. We're enabling users to access multiple models simultaneously. And over time, we're going to be tracking the performance of these different models so that we could literally serve up to you as a user, hey, you're classifying shoes coming out of Korea going to Brazil based on empirical data, and all of these models, we think you should be using HS classification A versus B for this. If it's an auto part with a different fact pattern, maybe you use a different model, but you'll do that all within a single orchestration platform. And yes, you can use AI to now chat with the cross rulings. And so this is an example where that same product data that we anchored and showed you at the first was fed into not only an HS classification tool, but cross rulings. And you can, the AI can figure out which rulings are most pertinent to the commodity that you're trying to classify, or determine country of origin, as Lee said earlier on. And once you've identified, let's say, the 10 rulings that are most applicable to your situation, you can now have a conversation with those rulings. It's kind of like creating your own informed compliance publication on a particular topic from authority, not from ChatGPT and the internet, but from the authority, which are the regulations, the WCO explanatory notes, chapter notes, and rulings. And then you can go in and query and research and ask it questions like, what do I need to know specifically about this product? In this case, it was a men's sandal, in order to classify it. And this is where it becomes instructive. And I just think it's cool because the AI is able to tell you, you need to know size in order to figure out what the HS code is. And this is an example where the AI came up with an initial classification, assuming the size was under 8. But then when we went back and said, nope, this shoe is actually size 8, it came back and said, okay, based on that, here's the right code. So it's not like we trained, as Lee said early on, a fixed model with questions to ask. The AI can learn instantaneously based on rulings that it reviews really, really fast, much faster than a human, and then it knows what questions to ask you to help get to the right answer. So that's just an example of how companies can not have to feel like they're getting locked in to one particular solution, but it's going to be a race to the top in terms of all the different solution providers coming out with their models. And I don't think there will ever be just one that's the best for everything, which is why you're going to have to pick and choose which is going to be best based on your product and the fact pattern.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thanks for that, Todd. We're going to move on a little bit to some challenges and solutions with AI and implementation. Lee, would you like to start that conversation? Just kind of what are some challenges in implementation that you've seen from the trade compliance side?
Most of the challenges are that I could think of involve the humans. So everybody has a boss. And the first thing you have to do is you mentioned that you want to do this technology project. So immediately they're thinking millions and millions of dollars. This is going to be a year or 2 years out before we see any results and so on. So you got to overcome that, and you have to really be able to convince them that like a sales pitch, basically, this is going to be a force multiplier for us. So everybody's got limited resources, limited staff, and this thing's going to be scalable so that you could double the business without doubling your staff, basically, in the compliance area, because the AI can really make the people you have a lot more efficient. So I think getting management to understand how it works and that it's not going to break the bank is one of the, but you do get a lot of value out of it. So the cost benefit analysis should be very positive on these things. So think about that before you approach management on it. The second thing is the associates. So Todd already touched on it. Everybody panics when they hear about AI, thinking, oh, I'm going to be the first one out the door. And really, we can't do away with the staff completely. I mean, there's going to be people that know how to run this, and they're going to get better at their job because they have this tool, and they're going to be able to do more work with the AI tool than they could in the past. Just from doing the research used to take hours and hours, and I've been just blown away by how fast the AI comes back with the entire solution and explains all the background and how they came up with the decision and so on. And it's very impressive. I tried to throw some of the most difficult classification decisions, for example, at AI, including ones that had to go to court to get them sorted out. And the AI brought all of that back in the answer, saying that this particular type of product was the subject of this court case that went to the appeals court, and here's what the decisions were. So it's very impressive and very fast. So getting the associates trained on how to use it and not to feel threatened by it is a second challenge that I could think of.
That's good. Yeah, I love the idea of looking at it as an internal sales pitch. I think that's so true. Our CEO, Shannon, is famous for saying AI will not replace the compliance person. A compliance professional will be replaced by a compliance professional that understands AI.
That's right.
I think that's a very true statement. So Todd and Joe, how do you guys address concerns related to data privacy and security when you guys are using AI in the field? Todd, you want to go first this time?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the concerns that have been expressed early on about privacy and security really have dealt with sending information into the large language model like OpenAI keeping that information, and then it may accidentally, show up in somebody else's output to a query, right? So that obviously is a concern. If you're Coca-Cola, you don't want to feed your recipe into OpenAI and start asking questions about it, right? Because now that recipe could sit there forever. Right. So that is a legitimate concern, but there are ways of addressing that. And of course, any company, any software vendor that is offering a solution like this should have already thought that out. We have. We are using Microsoft Azure, and they have an OpenAI service that's part of Azure for the enterprise. And there are guardrails, that you can put on that prevent information from being stored in the large language models. It goes in and then it gets deleted, and Microsoft, will guarantee that that's what's happening. There are ways where you can host your own LLM instead of going into somebody else's. And so that's another way, of protecting the privacy. So there are definitely guardrails and features that can be applied today to eliminate those concerns.
It's good. Joe, thoughts on
I'll just echo what Todd said. Our the thing that we maintain with our customers is that we will not train our models on our customers' data, and we don't do that. And so customers' data is customers' data, and like Todd said, inputs to the model are never used as the outputs, and there are guarantees that doesn't happen. That's kind of the privacy. Hey, is my information? If I put my information, is going to be shared. Then there's security. I think Todd would echo this. The way that we deal with security is that we use top-notch cloud hosting providers, whether it's Google or Amazon or Microsoft, that are hardened. We use best cases, best practices in all of those cases to make sure that all of our infrastructure is hardened against intrusion. We used intrusion detection to make sure that nobody's breaking in, and so I think that in our case, both of our cases, we're in pretty good shape in terms of security and privacy of customers' data, and we like to certainly believe and tell our customers that they do not need to worry about their data with us.
That's comforting. Thank you for that. Let's talk about some case studies and examples of AI kind of in today's workflows in the trade compliance world. Lee, maybe you can go first. Can you share some successful case studies where AI has improved? I know you have touched on that a little bit, but if you could just go into a little bit more detail on specific examples.
Well, let's talk about tracking back through supply chain for specific minerals, for example. So if you're a public company, you have to file a conflicts mineral report, and you have to look through your bill of materials for the products that you create, and you're looking for something that they refer to as 3TG, which is the 3 T's are tantalum, tin, and tungsten, and the G is gold. So if you use any of those minerals, you have to be able to prove that they didn't come from certain areas where there's conflict minerals being manufactured using forced labor and so on. So you can use AI to connect the dots between your suppliers of, it might be something as simple as a cap on a bottle that is a shiny gold color. And believe it or not, that shiny gold color comes from actual gold leaf that is put into the cap. So you might think, well, it's just a simple plastic cap, but actually it's got some gold in it. So you have to figure out where that gold came from. So you can start with your supplier and ask them where they got it, but then you have to go all the way back to the refinery in order to find out whether or not you are in any kind of violation under conflict minerals. So AI can help very quickly with that. And it can also identify any refinery that's on a sanctioned party list or is on a good to go list, because there are such a thing. Some organizations keep track of proven refineries that are certified as being safe. So that's a real life example that you could use AI to quickly get to an answer and trace through product.
That's a good one, Lee. Thank you. Todd, same question. How's AI, integrated AI in today's workflows?
Yeah, I'm gonna share just a couple of real life examples that I'm really excited about as a former consultant and still self-proclaimed trade compliance nerd. So we've talked a lot about HS classification. The area that I find fascinating in the area of how AI can help trade compliance is in qualifying a good for a free trade agreement. So what we're able to do with AI is, as you can see here, you can literally drop a PDF containing commercial invoice, purchase order, bill of lading, forwarder's cargo receipts, factory worker time cards, and a tech pack or a bill of material. So this is like unstructured data, right? And because of the newer advances in generative AI, you can OCR those PDFs without having to spend a lot of time creating templates to learn how to read a form. The information can be in multiple languages, foreign languages, weights and measures can be different. We can take all that information and literally create a worksheet, bill of materials, or a worksheet for purposes of determining whether or not a product qualifies for a free trade agreement, as you can see here. So this structured data was pulled out of the unstructured source documents, and then you can instruct the AI, if you're doing a free trade agreement and you're maybe looking at tariff shift or RBC, you may need it to classify every component that it found in that material, and you can use quick code to go in and classify all those components in the bill of materials, and then you can have the AI evaluate the rule of origin for any FTA in the world and come up with a determination. And that's exactly what we're doing. And it's good. Again, I'm not saying that that you take the answer and run. That's not what I'm saying. But if you need to figure out if a product qualifies for a free trade agreement before you import, or even post importation, did all the ducks line up in a row? Did all the documentation support what the exporter said in their certificate of origin. You can do this fast and at scale, and then the humans can come in and evaluate and read what it found. Could be there was missing information. Well, the AI is going to tell you, we couldn't conclude because we're missing a forwarder's cargo receipt. But we're seeing some amazing results on FTA. So that's one example. And then the other example, we just kind of take, if you anchor the fact that you can create a bill of materials and a supply chain flow from federated unstructured data from disparate sources, just as Lee was talking about with conflict minerals, well, let's map the supply chain for that SKU. And I've been beating the drum for quite a while now on forced labor, supply chain, tier-in mapping. We have to do it from a broad risk standpoint. You do need to look at the landscape of your suppliers. It's a requirement for CTPAT, but that's, in my opinion, inferential data that's sort of a macro view of a company's supply chain. But if there's a detention and customs wants you to respond to that detention and prove and rebut the presumption that there's forced labor in the supply chain, you're doing it at the SKU level. So if you have that bomb, well, we can use AI to create a map, not of your overall supply chain, but for that SKU. And so you could do that really fast with the same data that we just used for the free trade agreement, for example. We can pass that information on to a provider that will tell you whether or not the suppliers are flagged for sanctions, or if they're on the UFLPA list. There are lots of content providers that provide that information. Descartes, Sayari, for example. Again, rather than being locked into just one of those content providers, you have the ability to pull information from any one of those providers, as you can see here, and you can drill down on those suppliers that you found in that blob of unstructured data that I showed you a minute ago. And then if you are responding to a detention notice, or you're doing a risk assessment for forced labor risk, let's ask the AI, create a response to a detention notice based on all of the information that you've gathered from that blob of data that was provided from multiple resources. And what you see here is a 16-page report that we'll go through the facts of that shipment, who the buyer, who the seller, who the supplier was, traceability from factory to port, ship, offloading to distribution center, in detail. Where are the gaps? Where are the breaks in the chain, so to speak, and conclude on whether or not there's a nexus to forced labor. Again, you don't just hand this to customs. You got to read it, and you got to make sure that it's all factually true, and look at the source documentation to make sure that it backs up what the AI has generated. But again, it gets you there faster, and it tells you what you're missing to conclude the story. So, free trade, we talked about HS codes. Now we're talking about free trade agreement qualification, preferential origin generally, which also gets into China 301. Is my product really country of origin China, or was it just shipped from China, right? So we can do those types of analysis really fast once we get our hands on all this, the blob of data that comes from lots of different sources, putting it all together to create the picture. So forced labor is big. And another area that is big, and it's going to have a big impact, and we're running out of time, so I don't have time to show you, but is restricted party screening. And so we're seeing some really good results to allow the AI to disposition false positives from a restricted party screening standpoint. Right now, very human intensive. We think that we'll be able to reduce the amount of human effort in that regard by over 50%. So that's just another area that it's going to impact our lives in the area of trade compliance.
That's good. Joe, do you want to share a quick example? And then if you could kind of transition us into the future and, talk about a little bit about what you believe what AI's impact will be in trade compliance kind of in the next 5 to 10 years?
Sure. One of the things, really kind of the theme of what Todd said, I want to echo, which is we view AI as a force multiplier, right? It's not going to replace your people, but it's going to enable them to just work so much faster, so much smarter, do so much more things because the AI can bring all this relevant stuff and put them in front of it. And in our case, we have customers who are customs brokers, and they do classification for a living, and they use quick code, and they report that they can do their classifications 10x and in some cases 20x faster than they could without quick code, just again using the same process but just getting that information at their fingertips. We have customers who are importers. One in particular, they get a container full of samples twice a year, and these samples are the things they're going to be importing through the whole year, and so they have to classify this, basically everything they're going to import in the year, in this one container. And so in their case, it's an all hands on deck thing for a period of a month or more to get these classifications done before this container lands on the shore, because everybody knows if they don't get that done in time, what's going to happen. And again, they use quick code, and with that 10x improvement in speed, they're able to get those containers done. We also have customers who are manufacturers who, like I said, have these products catalogs of tens of thousands of things. And what quick code's enabled them to do is to look at things on an ongoing basis that they haven't looked at for months, and they don't look at until they need to. But until not so much as they need to, so they don't look at it until like it comes to their attention, and then they find, oh, this thing is classified on a bad number, or a ruling was issued on this, or something has changed, and this thing is no longer in compliance. And by using AI to kind of look at your stuff all the time without users required to be paying attention, and then bringing to users' attention things that might have changed, that's really our case studies are what we see AI, how it has helped in trade compliance. In the future, I wish I could tell you where AI was going in the future, because if I could do that, I probably could just make a lot of money. But unfortunately, I don't know. But I will tell you this, that the use of AI in the future, it is getting so much momentum that it's going to continue to gain momentum. And trade compliance people have to be using AI in the future, because they're going to be left behind not only by their competition, but also by the regulators. Customs and Border Patrol is not on board with AI yet, but there is no question they are going to be. And once they get on board with AI, I think we're going to see enforcement just ratchet up, because for the same reason that it's a force multiplier for trade compliance people, it's going to be a force multiplier for regulators as well. And they're going to be able to find things that they previously were not going to be able to be found, and people who are just kind of getting away with things are not going to be able to get away with it. And not saying getting away with things because they're intentionally doing something wrong, because they're accidentally doing something wrong or whatever. Those things are going to be caught and enforced in the future. And so I think everybody's going to have to up their game to keep up with the use of AI in the future, both against your competitors, against your regulators, etc. Those are my thoughts.
Good points. Lee, what are your thoughts? Future of AI?
Lee, are you still with us?
He might be frozen. All right, Todd, tee it up.
Yeah, so I think it's clear that it's going to have a very positive impact on our lives. I do think that there will be areas where we will become trustworthy of the ability of AI to do certain things for us without so much human intervention. So I've said this in some of the presentations that I've given in the last year that, today, with AI, we're kind of like at that new puppy stage. When you buy a puppy, you bring the puppy home, you don't let the puppy run all over the house, right? You have some guardrails on where the puppy goes and what the puppy can do, and you watch the puppy, you monitor the puppy. But then once the puppy starts to grow up and it learns where to go and you're comfortable it knows where to go, then there's less supervision, right? So I do think that there will be some functions that AI does that we will get more, the AI will get better, we will get more comfortable with its accuracy and consistency. And for those things, I think there will be less of a human touch, which will allow us to spend more time on other more complex areas where the AI, is still evolving. The other area in terms of the future of AI in trade compliance specifically, I can't speak in other areas. I mentioned restricted party screening. I think that's going to have a huge positive impact. But the other area that I'm really excited about, and we're seeing some amazing results, and I alluded to those earlier in the presentation, is in object and image recognition. So I do think that we will be able to classify a product just with taking a picture of the product. I think that the quality of images that you can get from a mobile device like an iPhone, we're already seeing facial recognition. I guess about 2 months ago, I took an international trip and they told me not to pull out my passport or my ID or my boarding pass because they had facial recognition as we were boarding the plane. I was a little freaked out by that, but I figure somebody smarter than me has figured out that this is probably a good thing. But in the same way, we'll be able to take a picture of a product and the AI will be able to literally, classify the product, figure out the jurisdiction for export controls, and a host of other things. And I think that's going to make our lives easier too. So we'll also be able to compare an image of a product that's being put into an overnight express shipment. And then the receiver of that product will also be able to look at that image and compare and make, and confirm that that's the same thing that was put into the box. So these are some areas that I'm real excited about in terms of the object and image recognition capabilities and combining that with AI.
Awesome. We're going to we're pretty close to time. I realized I never introduced myself because I was too excited to hear from the really smart people. I'm Bo Evans, Vice President of Sales at QuickCode. And I have the last question to Lee. You can touch really quickly on where do you think AI is, but what advice would you give to companies looking to adopt AI solutions for their future trade compliance needs?
Well, I think the most important thing is to find the right supplier. So do your homework. If you really want somebody that's going to be around for the long haul and somebody that you can trust. So check the backgrounds on who you're dealing with and make sure that it's an expert that can really guide you in the right direction and help you. And I learned something from Todd here that you've got multiple possibilities to look at right on one platform. So that's very helpful too. But that's what my advice would be, is just you got to find the right synergies and the right supplier.
Great. That's great. Well, I wanted to thank all our panelists, our great guests. I think everybody did a great job, and I hope our audience is well informed. And thanks everybody for participating, and thanks for coming to the webinar. We'll see you for the next one, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.